I'm going to guess Tessa. Yes. I might have guessed Leah, too. I could have gone 50-50 there. I got that one this time. Well, I think we're going to start, and our speaker will hopefully arrive. I thought this was maybe the best way to get him in here. There he is. All right, come on up, Neil. Yeah, I figured that was the only way to start this thing. Mary Custer out there said, if he's late, you can blame me. She knows that there's no repercussions for Mary Custer. That was my water, Neil. Okay. Here, let's get you going. We are recording, Neil, so you got to use the mic for everything.
Keep it clean, right?
Yeah, keep it clean too.
This is being recorded.
This is being
All
recorded.
right.
Yeah. I heard that they didn't record your services in California for that reason.
Correct. It was a 20-second delay. That's what it was. And they used it a lot.
We took Neil out hiking on Friday morning with Paul and Tom. And we had fun just, when you think about it, Neil was 20 when he did the internship. I think 21 probably when you were signed to the multi-million-dollar contract there.
Yeah, it's about the endorsements.
Endorsements plus, right?
Sponsored by the Alpine Cafe.
Big money there.
Free pancakes.
And just, how fun it was to have a kind of a crazy youth pastor. And so I think we probably are making the stories bigger than they were, but, you really were quite a carefree guy. And I think, for us to have somebody...
All the polite words, you were kind of carefree. I was a liability.
Well,
yeah. They didn't get insurance for 2 years because I worked here.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the 20-second delay, so I think they kind of got that. But, so we're going to follow the same format. I'll pray to start our time, and then we'll follow the same format. So it's a little different than last night, and Neil didn't come in with any plan for today. But, I'm basic. We're gonna hear your story, and it's going to start with your testimony, and everything will kind of be have to be quick if we're going to make it through.
I'm a pastor.
You're a pastor.
37 minutes.
Yeah, and you're a preaching pastor again now. Yes. We'll get there. But yeah, let's pray as we start. Lord, thank you for this time, and we're so amazed by your providence, and sometimes it takes a little time to look back and reflect on things that maybe seemed ordinary, but we find out they're extraordinary. And Neil's impact in my life and in this church, I'm not sure it ever felt ordinary, but it sure does feel extraordinary now. And relationships and laughter and activities and big dreams and lots of opportunities for ministry were a big part of our time together that we shared here. And now, Lord, I think it is good for a church to remember and to be encouraged by our stories and by our partnership together. So I pray that this time would be an encouragement to all that are here and many that are going to watch this on video later. So bless our time, Lord, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll give a quick introduction. So Neil came in the summer of 1987. And if you want to share that story of how you ended up being, but let me continue with my introduction here. And then how he became an intern here at the church. He was a Moody Bible Institute student. And then in 88, we had made an arrangement reached out to him, and he agreed to be our full-time youth pastor. So 88 to the fall of 99, he served as an associate pastor of the church. Those would also have been the years that the church moved from down on Jefferson Street, 94, so right in the middle of that time, we moved up to this campus. And again, Neil had a profound impact on the church. And maybe I won't share too much about Lighthouse. Maybe we'll just let that be part of the story. But Neil, the way we like to start, just first of all, would you give just a brief update, which you were going to do first service, but maybe you could do it now.
Didn't show up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny. And who was the culprit that was keeping him from his? It was Dale Maher. Dale took him out or had him over to your house, or took him out?
No, he actually bought us breakfast. Yeah, it was great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Forgot to pay. We kind of dined and dashed, but it's okay.
Right. Neil, give us a little update on, I see you brought your, I thought when you left here you had 3 boys, but you brought a daughter with you.
Yes, my daughter. Where is my daughter? Where are you? Where is it?
Karen, would you mind standing
there
up
she
and
is.
waving?
Karen
Okay,
Montgomery,
no,
ladies and gentlemen.
that's
The
his-
nice Karen. The very
That's
nice
his
Karen.
wife, but
Yeah.
she hasn't changed.
No.
If you talk to Karen. It's
She all
really-
said I aged in pastor years.
So give us a little update on where you've been since here, if you want to briefly do that, and then tell us a little bit. You had 3 boys at the time that you left, and they're all grown up now. A little bit about your family, and then specifically your ministry assignment now.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. Well, first of all, sitting here, and most of you are saying, who is this guy? I don't care about this guy. I'm a guy on a journey like all of us, so I hope it's meaningful to hear a little bit of our story, where we've been. Sitting up here has got, like, Karen and I drove into town, and I think she cried for the first half hour. And you realize there's so many emotions connected to sacred places in your life, and this place was that. And many of you, it wasn't just the space, but so many of you that when we were this young married couple, didn't have an idea how to be married. Karen always says we grew up together, but people taught us how to sew and make food and garden, and that was just me. And then Karen had to learn how to build houses and all that stuff. But it was, we were learning so much when we were here. So this place has a great role in the beginnings of our lives. And I forget, what was the question again? We had our 3 kids here. Some of you know we have 3 boys, and that's been a wild journey. I remember the very first day that I sat, some of you, how many of you were down at the old church? Anybody? Okay, great. See some of those people. Yeah, wow, there's some people. And I sat in, there was a closet that was my office. And they had to run a big, long phone cable. Those are those things that you pick up as a dial on it and that stuff. And I just graduated from college. We were just married. And I sat at the table, and I had to call Karen on the phone, and I said, I've learned all this theology, and I'm here. I said, but what does a pastor actually do? And we had no clue, And so we just started hanging out with people, and it became the most beautiful 12 years and the most trying 10 years too, because one of the things that I had was I had my Bible, and I said to Karen, I said, this is going to be the best job ever. Why? Because we all are on the same page. We all have the Bible, and we're all going to be moving in the same direction. Some of you are wiser to realize that's not how church works. There's sinners in church, and there's people that have evil intent in church, and that's just me half the time. And so we realized that, that people are people, and it began a beautiful journey, but also some of the greatest struggles of just trying to figure out where we are in our walk with the Lord and how we're going to do that and personally, and then how to express that in ministry. I did a lot of things wrong, so I have to first say, please forgive me for all the ways I messed up your kids and all the things I did wrong. And but also I love that God is sovereign, and God can cause all that to work together for His good, right? He can work that together. And so there's a lot of good things that went on. So we had our 3 boys here, and then after 12 years, we wound up taking a short excursus back to Canada. Last night we were joking because I had this little mantra when I was here. I was so tired of large churches having all the ministry, the good stuff, and I felt like small rural churches, had the well-meaning pastor with the wide tie preaching from the King James. Not to be offensive, that's a good version. But it kind of lost its relevance, and I thought, I want to bring relevance to rural America. So my little mantra, we were talking about it last night, was bringing quality ministry to rural America. And after 12 years here of incredibly fun, but also kind of burned out, God sort of took us to Canada. It wasn't America anymore, to a big city in Canada where there was a lot of quality ministry. I think so God laughs at all that. So we took our boys, went up to Canada. We were there for 4 years, working at the church I grew up in. And then I think God was just preparing us. From there, we actually moved and went out to California. We spent about 10 years. It sounds like we move around a lot, but we didn't move around a lot. We're just getting older. Probably averaged about 10 years in each place, but we spent 10 years in Northern California. And we were 2 earthquakes away from oceanfront property. I mean, if we stuck around, we probably would have that. We literally could hear the waves from a room, but we had 10 great years of ministry, our boys there. And then when we left there, we went to Scottsdale, Arizona, and we became basically instant empty nesters. Our oldest son had moved down there ahead of us. Our middle son was going to stay in Northern California, and our youngest son was going into college. And so we became instant. So we were there in Scottsdale for about 10 years. Again, just learning so much. And what I marvel at is in that whole time, we never got back to Baraboo. We left in 99, and we never got back to this place that has meant so much to us. And just about 10 months ago, we accepted a call to go to a church in Asheville, North Carolina, and we're Billy Graham's hometown. So one of the first weddings I did was in the chapel where Billy and Ruth got married. So that's kind of where we've been. Our 3 boys are all married. Alex is still in Phoenix, and he's a lineman like your brother was. And Colin is in Sacramento running a golf course, having our first grandchild in August.
You know, Clint Hutchins runs the golf course.
No, apparently, I went to the golf course on Friday. Nobody's running that golf course. I don't know who's running that golf. I hope he's not here because, yeah, that's
it's right in front of your wife there.
You weren't that. No, he's beautiful. I was with him. I was with Clint when he made his longest drive. I don't know if you remember that. And you were so excited about it that you put like all these tees around it. Like that was my longest drive. Now I bet you probably could hit it farther. I'm guessing. Yeah, the downward slide. Yeah, welcome to my world. And
but you said that Colin, right?
Colin.
To be a golf pro.
Well, he was going to become a golf pro, and I said during the downturn in economy, nobody's hiring golf pros. You get that?
Well, do you know Clint is both a golf pro and runs the golf?
I can tell you right now, I think Clint's on paper a golf pro, but what I hear at the club, not just kidding. He's bigger than me. Just kidding.
Poor Clint. I'm going to leave the golf thing. Okay.
No.
You have a third son. What's your third son's name?
I think I have a third. We do have a third son. Yeah, we do. Jesse, somebody remember, he was so little when we were here. He got married to his 6th grade sweetheart. Oh, wow. Went in the Air Force. He's still in the Air Force. He went to the Air Force Academy, so I don't know whose kid he is. But and he's an aeronautical engineer in Okinawa, Japan.
Nice.
And so that's where our kids are, and that's kind of where we are.
Back us up, Neil, and I was even telling Paul that I was going to do this, and he's like, "Oh, that'd be," we've asked everybody in very short form, but just tell us a little bit about your testimony. I know you've been raised in a Christian home, but was it a process for you to receive Christ, or was it clear from the very early years? Tell us a little bit about how you came to know Him.
And you keep saying brief, so I'll be brief.
Yes.
I prayed to receive Christ when I was 7 years old.
So a little more.
Okay, a little more than that. My family, my parents are still alive. I have 5 siblings. 3 of them were born in Glasgow, Scotland. In the 60s, my parents emigrated to Canada. And all 6 of us kids, sleeping in bunk beds, all that kind of incredible journey. And one day, my mom worked nights. My dad worked as a salesman during the day. There was a knock on our door. And someone said, "Hey, we're with this church." It was called Wortley Baptist Church. And we're inviting people to church. And we have a bus, and we'd love to invite you to church. And my parents were never so overjoyed than to get rid of 6 kids, to send them off with strangers on a bus. To do that now, that same couple would probably be in jail, but back then it was perfectly okay to send your kids off with strangers. And so all 6 kids went off to this church, and that's the first time I heard what it meant, to know who Jesus was.
Your
heard
parents
the gospel.
weren't believers at the time?
Not at the time, no. And so this was back in, I still have on my office, I have a picture of the bus and the original canvassing slip because they kept track of everything. That's before the World Wide Web. And then a little snippet of a testimony, and it's this beautiful picture of this bus. And so I went to this great Bible-believing church, told me about who Jesus was, understanding the gospel, and just understanding what sin was and this need to follow Christ. And as a young 8-year-old in 1975, I opened the back of a Gideon Bible, and I realized, there's a prayer to pray. Not that it's a formula, but that was the moment. I was camping. I was on a camping trip in our basement. That's where we camped. And I opened up this Gideon Bible and prayed to receive Christ. And that was the beginning of an incredible, and really, right after that, I was so hungry to read that little Gideon Bible. And I'd even open up my little desk, I remember in the 7th grade, and I'd try to look like a raccoon caught in the garbage reading my little Bible. And I had a real hunger right from the beginning. And I remember I'd come home, and my poor little sister, I'd sit her on the ground, and I'd sit on top of this box in our basement. I'd just preach at her, And so I think she's in therapy today, but it was and that just began a great journey of loving God and loving people, so not perfectly, but it's been no turning back.
So now I'm just curious, did your parents then
eventually, as it is so many times, and we experienced it here, I think the Roloffs, I don't know if they're here, their kids started coming to Awana here, and that's why they started. And it's over and over again, you hear stories
Davids did that.
yeah,
too.
so many people that their kids went to church, and then their parents went, what's that all about? And that still happens today. And so they eventually were curious about who was taking our children, where were they taking our children, and so they showed up.
Why do they want to be there?
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. And so they met a couple who came along, as it is so often, most of you come to know Christ through some sort of adversity that makes you think differently about the world and the path you're on, and then most of us have a person or a couple that walk with us on that journey. And that's exactly what my parents had. They had a couple, Don and Mary Ellen, still alive. Pray for them every day. And they led them to the Lord and led them to this great church. And so my dad was kind of a heavy drinker, but he was one of those happy drunks. He's a Scotsman. I love drinking beer. Just bring more of it. It's fantastic. And the day after he committed his life to Christ, he never smoked or drank again.
Can you do the 20-second thing, Paul?
But now when he drinks, no. And so they turned their lives, it was kind of miraculous to watch my parents turn their lives around in such a profound way. And and they're so relational. They're just beautiful, beautiful people.
Yeah, I hope that we're catching that. This story comes up again and again. I think of Tom Gray, his story of having the gals come and pick him up, a bus ministry in Minneapolis. Tom's not here, but Pauline is here. This gal drips with sweet, I mentioned last week. She's amazing. But Steve Higgins, who showed us expeditions, he always says he's a third generation Christian in reverse. So he came to know Christ, then his parents came to know Christ, then his grandparents. So I think we just did a VBS, and I always say, hey guys, let's zero in here. I know we're exhausted, and everybody's exhausted, even with those initials when they come out, VBS. But man, that potential for impact not only on those kids to hear the gospel. Parents will send their kids to VBS around here. I don't know everywhere, but they sure do here. So that's wow, I hadn't heard that. That's a really neat story, Neil. Okay, so give me a little bit on, take me to Moody Bible Institute. Was America something you had visited a lot, or had you just heard of Moody? I remember you saying you grew up in a city, if I'm remembering this right, that was actually further south than Baraboo. Or Ontario or something.
Southwestern Ontario comes down with all the Great Lakes, and if you drew the...
Okay, so you weren't that far away from Moody, but tell me a little bit about the decision to go to Moody. You clearly were thinking a Christian education. Were you thinking ministry too? And then maybe you can slide into a quick story bring Karen into this story somehow.
Karen, yes. And so I was always enamored with America. Always, I was like, wow, these Americans, they do everything right. All the television shows we watch was Americans, and I was always enamored with that. And around, how many of you saw the movie The Jesus Revolution? Anybody see that movie? It was just whatever you want. I think there was a movement. Looking back, I think there was a revival that was really happening in America. And from that was the first time ever a church ever thought about hiring a youth pastor. And it was 1979. The church I was attending thought, hey, we should hire a youth pastor. And really the fruit of that Jesus Revolution on the California coast got all the way to this little town in Ontario. Wow. And we had a youth pastor, a guy named Bob Borman. And when Bob came, I had plans when I graduated college to get into theater arts and dramatic arts. And so I was in this Actors Guild doing all these big plays in London, Ontario, which is the Stratford of Ontario. And as I was doing that, I started to get a little disillusioned when I looked around the room and I saw people who'd committed their lives to acting, which in Greek is the word hypocrite. And so all these people living their lives, and it was just so empty and sad and depressed. And for the first moment, I thought, I'm not sure I want to do that with my life. And that's when God brought this youth pastor in my life, and we just became fast friends. And it was out of spending time together. We talked a little bit last night about how I think the Christian journey is all about relationship. And this guy just reached out, spent time with me, and I'd never had anybody just take an interest in me. And there was something so beautiful about that relationship. And I would say I fell in love with Bob. I mean, he was just this great guy who would answer all my questions about God and what it meant to walk with God. And I came away from that going, that's what I want to do with my life. I don't want to sell soap and widgets and try to make money. I want to help people see Jesus. And so he had gone to Moody Bible Institute. I want to go to Moody Bible Institute. And so got in the car. And by the way, I had dated, like, I'd only dated like 3 women. I was one of those possessive, creepy guys who's, I want to marry you. I want to marry you. I want to marry you. And they're like, not me. And so I'd broken up with this girl. And I said, okay, fine. I'm going to become a monk. And I really felt that way. I am done with the dating scene. And so I went off to Moody, packed up my bags, and said, I'm done. I'm going to become a monk. And so I went to Moody, and it was there. Within a very short time, I was sitting in a personal evangelism class, and Karen tells the story better than I do. I walked in and I didn't know anybody, but you had to wear a tie and a suit, and I'm looking like, I got a tie on, and the teacher's not there. I should teach the class. And so the very first day of school, I went up and started teaching the class.
The first day?
Yeah. And I was teaching the class. I didn't know what I was saying. I was just kind of being goofy, and everybody's like, oh. And there was a girl at the back, and I'm like, wow, she's like an American Girl doll. They didn't have those yet. And so I thought, I'm probably so cool. And so I sat down. I went, ha, 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 sat down. I'm not really the teacher. And I thought, this girl at the back's going to think that's awesome. I later found out she's like, that is the weirdest guy in the world ever. So that was the end of that story. But I won her over, and eventually. So I went to Moody. That was our time there, and it was really revolutionary for us to figure out how to serve God and from a capacity of helping people see what's really eternal and what's really important.
Yeah, and so when Neil did the internship, and I'll have you share that story, I did go down and visit you. I don't know if you remember that. That next year when you were back down at Moody, I was on campus and spent a night in. You had a dorm mate there, and I would say you sort of dated Karen. Yeah, they were pretty careful.
Pretty strict.
Yeah, they're very strict, and I'm sure they're a little different now. But like you couldn't even go to a movie theater on breaks, right? Even going.
We still don't go to movie theaters, do you?
I haven't been to Jesus Revolution.
We rent.
One up.
No, touche.
Yeah.
There's some really bad parts in that movie. I would never go.
Yeah. But yeah, you had a brand of faith that was strict on obedience and strong in theology and Bible, and you now remind just a small thing, but you did 3 years at Moody. You couldn't get they didn't have a liberal arts, and you had to come here. Did you got that through Boo
Yeah,
U,
I went to Boo U.
Yeah.
I was a married guy that went to Boo U.
I remember you.
I took all easy classes like French. I'm like, I'm from Canada. I already know French. So it was great. You just put an accent on everything, you're speaking French.
Right. So, okay, good. And why don't you share the story about how, and that's yours. I'd like to check with Carl and see if that's possibly true. But I did find it an
Fact
interesting story.
checker, fake news. Now what am I going to say? I was going to embellish that. So I was at Moody, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life after that, and it was actually Karen who we'd spent a summer apart and all that kind of stuff, and she was like driving me crazy, like just attached to me. I'm like, oh wait, that was me. And so we didn't want to spend another summer apart from each other, and so there was a meeting, a business. Some of you were there at that meeting, and they talked about having a summer intern in the summer of 1987. And that's all they did was they talked about having a summer intern. And there was a guy, is Pete Finger here? There was a guy, Pete Finger. Some remember Pete Finger. He was at Moody. And he just came down. I think he's working for the student newspaper. And he just put it in the newspaper. Little church in Wisconsin looking for an intern. And Karen found it. She said, you got to apply for this because then we'll be within 200 miles of each. Like, that makes us closer. Like, I didn't have a car. What am I going to get, a Greyhound bus and come see you or something like that? So, but I did. I applied, and in Carl Zort, who was a pastor at the time, he said, I'm getting all these calls from people about an internship. I better come down and interview some people. So he came down, and he interviewed some people, and I made sure the other guys didn't show up for their interviews. It's another story, confessing that. No. And I think they did. Surprisingly, said, hey, we'd like you to come up and spend a weekend with us. And they literally gave me a Greyhound bus ticket, and I slept in and missed the bus. First impressions were really good. And so I had to get another bus. I had to go to Madison. They picked me up there. So ever since then, I've been flopping all over the place. So that's the story of how I connected with
Got
First
it.
Grad.
Okay. Oh, this is great, and you really are timely with
telling
your
you,
answers.
stuck
That's
the landing.
outstanding. I break down your time. I don't know if anybody's ever done that before, but I would say you had your first year, if we make that a year, was a summer, and then 88 to 92 was kind of First Baptist Church ministry, and of course you were still part of the church after that.
You should write a book because you seem to get everything down just beautifully. Huh? Wouldn't that be great? I would buy that. I would buy that.
88 to 92.
I asked for one and he gave me it.
Whatever I said in there and signed it, I don't mean it. But 88 to 92 was kind of First Baptist ministry with, we were meeting at the Civic Center, or East School, I think, First Civic Center, but we would have small groups. I think we even met at my house. The Beaches were leading when I was in middle school there at my house. That might have been before you came and that transition. And then I would say the last 7 years were kind of defined by your time with Lighthouse. So I want to start with that internship. And we talked about this briefly, but Neil was looking for, he was supposed to be doing an internship, and I don't know how many hours it was or how that was working, but he was looking for ministry.
This meeting is part of those hours. I haven't got my degree yet, so just finishing it up.
Finishing up some of your hours, yeah. And then of course I was just finishing 7th grade, so I had the summer off. I wasn't working yet, and my mom was the church secretary for 30 years. So she was the secretary. So I'd go over there, and this guy that was really cool, neat. So Neil did a lot of playing with me, and I know John
working.
Dominguez would come with me, Tom sometimes, but yeah, working, playing, not playing with me, but
ministry.
Yeah, working, ministry, right? And it was, when I think of it, you did a lot of, to be able to administrate a big program like a Lighthouse, and I know you had help with that too, but to cast a vision for big, and I think people kind of see you as big. In that sense, but also, being able to really develop very sincere, profound relationships with individuals. I remember you playing basketball. And why were we playing basketball? Right. Because I loved basketball, and then you'd play with me, at my parents' place, and you were always wondering, okay, explain to me, because I like to explain things. What's a foul? That was your thing. Explain to me a foul. Like what?
We check in hockey.
Right, in hockey they would hit, and he knew I was making contact, but you didn't understand what I was doing. And why does that count as not I can't touch you or I can touch you? But we, spent so much time at Devil's Lake. But I think you just dove in, and like you mentioned early, to relationships. And I think you developed them with that internship year. You immediately, and you probably didn't think it was anything more than an internship. But if you don't mind commenting a little bit on, that's part of your gift set. My mom sometimes says, it sounds funny when I say this, it sounds like a break, but she said, well, have you ever thanked God for your personality? Like there are a lot of other ones that could have been a lot worse.
Or lack of personality. Not in your case yet.
But God did give you an ability to interact with people and to want to grow deep in relationships. And I feel like you found that right away and probably everywhere you've been. But talk a little bit about
I really give my dad credit for that. My dad just, everywhere he met, he never had a stranger. And so my dad never taught me how to drywall or cut the grass or how to change your oil in your car. I'm still mad at him for that. But he did teach me how to love people. He was a very beloved man. I shouldn't say was. Sorry, Dad. And that was, I'm so grateful for that. So when I didn't know what to do, and I just started, I'm going to love people. I'm just going to hang out with people. That was easy. It was fun. I think what God was doing was he was forging relationships. Relationships that were strategic, relationships. I shared a verse last night. We're teaching through Acts. You guys already did it. I'm using all your notes. But there's a time in Paul's life where he got really discouraged, and you know it because, and afraid even, like he was getting beat up in all these cities. And you're like, God, I signed up for this. Why is this happening? And this just jumped out to me because we studied this for years. But in Acts 18, the Lord appears to Paul, and he says, "Don't be afraid." And I thought, wow, Paul's afraid, so he must have been afraid. And then he said to him, keep doing what you're doing. Do what I've called you to do. Do what I've wired you to do. And then he said, remember, I'm with you always. Remember that. And Paul knew that, but he's remember that. And then he said this most beautiful phrase at the end of Acts 18, verse 10. He said, for I have people in place already. Corinth was a carnal city, not really any believers, but God in his sovereignty knew that there would be people in place. I think that's exactly what happened here. I came in this green guy, I didn't know anything, just did what I knew to do. I loved Jesus. I wanted to love people. And I think God used those relationships to build with so many different people so that when we launched a larger ministry, those people were just kind of ready. They knew who I was, and we had a relationship. And so I also think strategy comes from relationship. And so I think it just kind of, Karen was reminding last night, just kind of fell into place. God had people like Debbie Pim at Emmanuel United Methodist Church and other people at the Pleasant Valley Praise Center. I don't even know, I forget what it's called now, and over here at Abundant Life. And all these churches just started
You're
coming
just
together.
making up names.
I don't even know anymore what they
New
are.
Life
Yeah,
and-
New
yeah,
Life,
look it
whatever.
up.
Yeah, those churches. Mormon
Abundant
Church
Life.
and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, and then, okay, so then move into the 4 years, then, okay, now you're actual youth pastor. So they contacted you somewhere along the line. Did they leave you that internship year saying, hey, we might ask you to come?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of, and then during the year, like Karen and I were getting married, and like a month before we were to get married, we had no idea where we were going to live. And I think, First Baptist, Walnut Hills, trying to scramble together some package. Could we have them come? All that kind of stuff. And they finally sent me an offer letter, and they said, we'd like to offer you a position at First Baptist Church. We'd like to pay $10,000 a year. And in today's dollars, that's about $10,000. And so we didn't know how we were going to make it. And I countered. I said, I did. True story. I did. I countered. I said, 10,500, we got a deal. And they're like, we'll figure it out. And literally, some of you remember this. Some of you remember Ed and Barb Pike, of course. And they said, well, we have a house. Not really. We have a loft. We have a garage. And we didn't care. We were new. So we lived above Ed and Barb Pike's garage for the first year or so that we were here. And
clearly.
it was fine, but except we had to cut through their living room. And Ed and Barb weren't small people, and their living room wasn't very large, and so we'd come in, we'd have to crawl over their laps and up the stairs to get to our little room that we lived in, and that was the starting of our time. And literally, we felt so like these experiences, you look back, these are the best of times and the worst of times. But it was the beautiful thing was they had provided this place for us, like $125 a month, all in, even Wi-Fi before Wi-Fi existed. They said it was covered in all this, but it was all in. And we're like, yes, we love that. We are all in. And then over the years when we didn't make ends meet, I just sent Karen out to work. And true story, she had to work. And you did. She worked. Spent a lot of hours trying to put it together. And then people just took care of us. Like this is I don't know if you know about Wisconsin, but it's kind of a farming community. Did you guys know that? And I just figured that out. And people would say, I get a call on the phone and go, hey, one of our cows went down. We're going to cut it up into ground beef. Would you? I don't know if that's how Wisconsin people talk. Would you like some of that? And sure enough, we took the ground. We didn't have a freezer. Someone goes, well, I got a freezer. I'm like, well, okay. So people would literally give us ground beef or half a hog or chickens. I really felt like we were back in the prairie days.
Yeah.
So we were really blessed, and we were happier than pigs.
I remember throwing firewood down your
Totally.
basement. Yeah, that was
We had
two
pastor's
houses
wood
away.
cutting
Yeah, right?
days. And then, about a year into that, Karen goes, I just want my own front door. Just want my own front. So I found a place above Hills Gifts and Gallery that had 6 front doors. They take those old businesses, they screwed the doors shut, and he made 2 apartments. Said, here's your front doors. and the first time we're in there, it smelled like the guy had cats. And Cal Hill said, no, we don't allow pets. I'm like, no, there were cats in here. It smells like cats. And so he said, no, we didn't. I said, no, there were cats in here. So we're looking up online before online was big. We figured out, how do you get rid of a cat smell? And someone said, well, if you smoke cigars. And we're like, we don't smoke cigars. And so I said, Karen, would you smoke some cigars? True story. And so we got these cigars, and we're coughing. We're like, and we're sitting on the ledge, overlooking downtown like this, going, trying to get, and it sort of, and it's a true story. I'm so sorry if I'm offending many people. It's like equal opportunity offender. That's what I am. But we really did this, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden Karen's like, Barb Pike's pulling up. Put that out. So she comes up to the apartment, and like, they had cats. The previous guy smoked, but we got some front doors. We're happy. So
Nice.
that's our story.
That's funny. Well, I
Kind
would
of closing
say-
prayer.
Yeah. I would say one thing about your house that was downtown, or your place that was downtown. I do remember you did Sunday school class there, I think, too. I think we would drive down for Sunday school for some stretch. I remember doing, or maybe it was just a couple times for some reason, but it might have been. But we were going through the book, This Present Darkness. Whenever I think of the Frankie Peretti, book and spiritual warfare, I envision myself at some loft. At least one of our lessons was there. So you guys worked ministry into. You probably got to write.
That was such a scary book. Do you guys remember when that book came out? That we were in Ed and Barb's apartment again, and someone gave me like a Mylar balloon for my birthday or something like that. You weren't there. It was just Karen and I. But in the middle of the night, the Mylar balloon, they let the air out a little bit, and so the air had come up, and it was kind of blowing toward. And I got up in the middle of the night, and I could see like these two red eyes, and it was our alarm clock reflecting off the Mylar, and it was just floating toward the bed. And I literally got up, tough protector that I am, and I went, ah! And then Karen goes, it's a balloon. I'm like, I know it's a balloon. I just was trying to blow it back. So go back to sleep. So Frank Peretti, thank you, Frank.
During that time, again, we had ministry. I remember at East School and the Civic Center, you introduced youth retreats. I don't know if we never had them before then, but that became a big part of our ministry. A lot of the things that we do now, regular mission trips, Flambeau River canoe trips were a real hit with Paul. You kind of gave Paul a little platform there. You brought the crew, and then Paul did a great job administrating those trips, Grand Canyon trips. And I mentioned the mission trip to Chicago, and I did remember that I had an old T-shirt from
That's
that trip.
hilarious.
Do you remember this one?
Oh, yeah, I totally remember that one.
I think there was a little bit of flooding in the town while we were on the trip. And so people were, of course, in Chicago making shirts. I survived the great
right on
Chicago
the street, yeah.
flood, April 13th, 1992. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't believe maybe we should use it every once in a while. But
yeah, I apparently don't wear it anymore.
Yeah, we thought we had stuff we kept for a long time.
Right, yeah, I was thinking your pizza pan, that you brought to youth group last night. But yeah, you apparently you built up a youth ministry and got rolling. And then at some point, you decided that you wanted to interact. You were very involved in the public schools with coaching, Teen Institute, any opportunity to reach kids. And you shared a little bit about this last night, but tell a little bit about your vision for those of you who don't know and are kind of newer here. During, I would say, fall of 1992 through 2002, but through 99 when Neil was here, we actually had, it's really quite remarkable. I would call it a combined or collaborative, a combined youth ministry of 4 or 5 churches. Different ones would kind of come in and out, but usually there were about 4, and they literally had youth group together. Like they had their middle school programming was together. Like sometimes groups will combine, but to suspend your own programming in favor of a combined youth ministry was a pretty amazing act of unity for a group of churches to undergo, and it just blew open this community, and you just saw we had just this amazing core. Your core kids that were very committed to the Lord, and probably in the margins of that maybe, or also within you had kids that were very well liked, or reaching out to friends, and all of a sudden it became very comfortable for others to be on the margins. You'd have huge events, and there'd be a couple hundred kids, and I would say on regular events you'd have a couple hundred kids coming, and the churches were so pleased to be working together. Tell a little bit about what was the vision for that, and comment a little bit about your Lighthouse experience.
No, again, thinking back to the Jesus Revolution, I think I was on the coattails of just capturing some of the fruit from that, and I think as a young pastor, you're thinking, look at all the stuff I did. I think anybody could have come in there, and God was moving, in one sense. And so I feel like I just showed up. And God said, okay, you're going to be the instrument that I use to kind of bring this together. And he used a lot of instruments, but it came from just a frustration that I had. You have a church of just a few kids getting together, and a few kids get together, it's kind of awkward, and I thought, well, what if we brought more kids together? And we were always struggling for money to do things or try to, really make an impactful environment for young people. And so I began to have coffee with some of the pastors around town, and just sort of cast a vision, going, what if we could do things together? And everybody's got concerned about their theological distinctives, and I said, well, we can handle that by, when it comes there, we'll teach all the distinctives and just say these are the black and white non-negotiables of Scripture, which is what we fellowship on, and then these are the things that the various churches would teach. And they thought, well, that sounds good, and because you had all these youth groups hanging out at the high school or whatever that didn't know maybe there were even other Christians on campus. So that was kind of what was behind that too. Are we alone? We're supposed to share our faith, but this is scary. And so when we started bringing churches together, I think students looked and said, yeah, I'm not alone as a follower of Jesus. And we began to create this environment, and fun was a big part of that, just to kind of bond. I think it's very bonding when we laugh together, and then just playing together, and then bringing the Word of God into that. I think God used that in some really, really cool ways. But again, I feel like I just was the guy who got to be part of that. And then God brought in so many other people. And it was a beautiful season. And we talked a little bit about, Dan was like, sorry, I tore it apart. And Jed Krause said, sorry, I tore it apart. We both know. It wasn't really even torn apart. It was just a sweet season, I think, that you just, to try to maintain it, would be like what churches try to do to survive. It was like, no, God brought in the next crew, and that there was a fresh new season. And so it was really fun. And then yesterday, I don't know if we got a bunch of those kids together, and it was just so fun watching all of them just greet each other and just have memories flowing. And so it was just really cool.
Nice. I did want to ask a little bit. It's interesting, and this is more of a reflective question than just kind of following your story for a minute. But I remember in youth group some themes that we followed that are kind of mocked now. And I mentioned in the service this morning, because I thought you were going to be there, and I wanted to kind of tie you in.
I was at another church.
Yeah.
the real church.
Abundant Life, wherever that is, yeah. They now kind of mock it as purity culture. That's specifically talking about sexual morality, but they see it as almost oppressive. I looked up something about it last night, and they were referring to purity culture, and they were talking about therapy resources that are out for people that were harmed by purity culture, and the idea of, and I think maybe there were some movements that made such a big deal about the rings and the, like they really accentuated purity to the point that if you were no longer a virgin, you were impure now the rest of your life, kind of thing. But I guess I would say overall, my feelings when I hear about it is I don't think that was harmful. I think you were challenging us to do things God's way at an age, their age-defining temptations and struggles. And, I guess I'm just interested to know if when you reflect upon the way that the world sees purity and holiness and, and kind of that mocking of the Christian desire to walk with the Lord and to be separate from the world. I didn't know if, you've been through a lot in the last 24 years. Have your churches and has your own feelings about those movements stayed the same?
Yeah, I as a youth pastor, many of you guys know this in your own lives, I was always trying to tune into what was happening in culture. And I think back there that was. The Jesus Revolution was all about sexual impurity, and let's just experiment with that and see where that goes. And I do agree with, I love Ecclesiastes for the sole reason that Solomon told us that all those roads lead to a dead end, right? That's why I said vanity of vanities, all is vanity. There's nothing new under the sun, and it just leads to a dead end. And I loved how when people come to that place, there's an opening for them to go, maybe this isn't the right truth. And I think back in that post-sexual revolution culture, there was a movement back to purity. And so really, we just sort of piggybacked on. Josh McDowell had come out with a big book, and there was curriculum that was out on just recommitting yourself to purity. And And so that was our whole heart. We just wanted people to live pure lives before God. And what was hard, I think, as a Christian man, as a pastor, was I always use this illustration going, we're these guys up here who are telling you, this is the way Jesus wants you to walk, the narrow road. And it's a good road. You're going to find that Jesus' yoke is not heavy and his burden is light. And we're here to hold the white flag up. And I always use this illustration. It's a bad illustration because it's so negative, but I always think of a guy who's standing there with a sign saying, bridge out. And you're warning people. And I think that was kind of like, hey, there's a path to walk, and here's one. Sexual purity is one of those things. But if you blow through this, it's not going to be a happy landing. And what I felt like through a season of my life, I felt like I'm here with this sign, and people would blow through it and dive off and realize there's no bridge, and they would crash. And then I felt so much of my ministry was focused on, after that, going down to the bottom of the hill and helping people kind of piece things back together again. And because I think I've talked to so many of you this weekend, some beautiful stories of young people, and there were so many of you that said, yeah, I learned about God and I learned about how to walk the narrow road, but I spent a lot of years walking away from God. That's probably most of your stories. And then there was a time in my life when I walked down the broad road, which is easy, and I got to the point I realized this is going nowhere. And that was a turning point for you. And I think one of the ministries, what it morphed into, I think when I started out in ministry, I was all about people-pleasing, and I wanted people to like me, and I wanted to be this cool pastor, and so I'd take issues, and all of our teaching would be issues. But what it really became is recognizing that when people try to obey God without Jesus, just for the sake of obedience, you have legalism and religion, and that gets old fast. And so I'd watch people blow through that, and then where God took me was, no, your job is to help people come back to Jesus and sort of refine that footing. Because I think a lot of us do that. We get really excited about our faith, and we take off, and we just realize we're doing church, and we're doing religious things, and we're trying to obey, and it's killing us. We're exhausted. And it's just because we forgot that Jesus said, abide in me, abide in me, abide in me, abide in me. And out of that will come your ability to trust and follow and obey. So that's been the morph of my life, has been recognizing, because I got frustrated when you guys, didn't keep your red quarter, because everybody made a red quarter, they'd used to call it the purity quarter, if they're, and they just blow it. And I'd get so upset by that. And I was like, as if God said to me, that's not your job. Your job's not to be the moral police. Your job's not to fix everybody's life. Your job is to be my vessel through your brokenness to help people come back to wholeness in me. And that's been kind of the shift in my life. It's all about, I still believe highly in sexual purity and walking morally with Jesus, but I think the motivation is different. I think before it was, I want to do this so that I'm good with God, and the message is, no, you're already good with God because Jesus accomplished that work on the cross. You're a saint because of his work, not because of anything you do. And now live rightly because you're a saint, not because you're trying to earn anything. And that's been a big nice paradigm shift for me.
Yeah, I like it. I think that mix of being able to, you cared about, I know I'm kind of building you up here. I apologize for if I'm encouraging you too much, but your ability to draw large groups and to be funny in front of a crowd and to organize tons of fun really had a wonderful outreach component to it, and the sincerity with which you share the gospel and urgency, but you also invested in specifically young men and the gals too. But it is interesting how many young men that you discipled either through the ministry or specifically through small groups entered ministry. I know I didn't expect to go into ministry when I was taking off in what it would have been 92 to school. People were asking, I wanted to go to Moody where you went, but then I found out the only degree programs they had there were for people going into ministry, and I knew I didn't want to go into ministry, so I went to Northwestern and was going to be a teacher. But but I ended up heading into ministry, and I think of even just last night we had Zach Jantz was there, Nathan Wagner was there, Jed Krause. We had I think a Chris Ruge became a missionary, Kyle Von Ruden a missionary. and probably some others that I'm thinking of. But
I think Russ Roloff,
Russ
one of
Roloff
the
was there.
missionary.
Yeah, Russ Roloff was a missionary there too. Yeah, yeah. That was a significant part of your ministry too. I don't know if that was intentional or you had goals to do that, but you somehow cast a vision and you invested in young men. So you had the care for the big outreach kind of stuff. But I remember you picking me up. I wasn't a real early to rise kind of guy. Now I picked you up at 5:30 on Friday, so I kind of switched that around.
Getting old, you can't sleep. Yeah.
Right. I can sleep still, but yeah, yeah. In fact, I sometimes didn't like it at all. So do you remember you had an event where the high schoolers would go around or I don't know, you just picked everybody up, kind of kidnapped them on a Saturday morning. Yeah. I kind of need to confront you on that. And do you remember this?
Yeah, I think we were talking about that. You just go in and you just wake people up, and you arrange with the parents, make sure they're dressed appropriately, and you go in and wake them up, and then you kidnap them.
Well, you checked with Denise.
Yeah.
You didn't check with my mom.
No, yeah.
And I was
you were fair game.
Yeah,
you were fair.
I'm sure you remember this, John. I spent the night at his house. We stayed up way too late and ate all the Doritos and Faygo pop that we could take care of in one night. And then in the morning, like 6 in the morning, you showed up.
Boom. Let's go.
And you were taking it, and we wouldn't go. I mean, like I literally just hunkered down, and it was going to be life or death moment at that time, and which wasn't good because you were always really tough. But you said, well, that's fine, but we're coming back with the high school boys. So you left, and John and I just took off.
I do remember that.
We got dressed, and you had awards for the event, and I still probably have that probably in one of Mom's closets. It was the Oscar the Grouch Award that I received in absentia. I wasn't there, but you did award that.
Of course you
to
weren't
me.
there, yeah.
So yeah, you sometimes pushed us a little bit, but yeah, you really invested in the guys. And was that intentional, or are you surprised too how many young men entered full-time?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was always taught discipleship, evangelism, spend time with people, point them to Jesus, all those kinds of things. But I always think God knew what he was doing. He was preparing ahead of time, and I got to be able to watch that take place. So I was learning on the fly, and trying to focus on best practices. One of the other things I did strategically, I think that looking back was wise, was I just found youth pastors wherever they were, and I would meet with them. Tell me what works in your ministry. How do you guys are doing ministry? And then God always, everywhere I've been, God always gave me a mentor. Somebody that would say, hey, come on, pay attention, or walk this way, and because he knew I couldn't do it alone. So I always had a mentor wherever I was, and then I always had colleagues in the industry, so to speak, and so I was trying to practice. And then I just had no clue. This is the only time I'd done this. I had no clue what God was going to do, but what a joy to watch people to do that. And I think in my personal spiritual journey, there's a season of your life where you sort of pat yourself in the back going, wow, look what I did. But in my older age, I'm like, that had absolutely nothing to do with you. I mean, God used you, and that's where I'm at. Like God used me, and God gets the glory, and that's what's really important. I'm not trying to be hyper spiritual, but that was part of my own personal journey, was giving that over to the Lord and just learning to thank him for his grace. When Karen and I came back here, the very first thing we did when they said, hey, they're going to do a little lighthouse. Sorry, we didn't make it to the 175th. We were moving and doing weddings. And I think Alicia Montgomery said, well, let's do a lighthouse thing. And then so Karen and I immediately went on diets and started lifting weights. True story. And we're like, we're in suntan beds and all that stuff. And not all of us, just one of us. And all of a sudden, we're like, wait a minute. This isn't what it's about. It's not trying to recapture something from the past. It's trying to gather together and celebrate just stories of God moving in our lives, and not like the good, the bad, and everything, and just seeing. And that's happened. I mean, just hearing, it's been the biggest. I'm hoarse just trying to listen to people. Wait, that means I was talking to people. But just talking with people and hearing about their stories has been so great. So I think the relational part of it was just, even as I look back, I'm still so fond. And I think God's changing my heart, and I'm appreciating that season more now than I did when it was kind of the thing that filled my love bank, that filled my validation too much. And now I'm going, God, that was all about you. And now I can just say, wow, I got to have a front row seat to watch some things that you were doing.
Amen. And just another bone to pick with you, and you can help me put this.
Do we
one
need to talk
together.
like in private?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you told me, and others have told me too, that I kind of quit coming to youth group towards the end of my time, and I did share that story with John. I said, you wouldn't believe what Neil just told me. And then later, so my son John, who's here this weekend, and in fact, I thought he was coming to the class today, so he's not here. But he said, yeah, try something. Yeah, he said something about he was going to need to confront you about that. Or he said, I'm going to have to confront him about what he did. And I'm like, what's that? And he said, Neil says that we had to end. That I was frustrated with you. Well, go ahead and tell him why.
What happened was, as a youth pastor, you're trying to be godly. So sports was a real connection, I think, for you and I, and a lot of the kids. So we got involved in coaching and sporting. So a lot of what our ministry games were, we were doing sports. And initially, I learned as a young married man that you can pummel the freshmen and feel good about yourself. And I thought, that's not a good way to do ministry. And so I decided you need to make the game a little fair so everybody can kind of have some victories in that. But when you came along, you were still like, no, we need to win. And I don't understand why you keep changing the rules. That's what you would say. You did it in your little Vikings little shirt.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you.
You had this Viking shirt on. I'm like, you're a Viking fan. That's what you be. And you got mad, and you would just be so mad about, man, why would you just play the game the right way? And you got so mad you actually stopped coming for a while, and it made me sad because I thought you're a great guy, but and then your mom I think had a great idea. I was like, why don't we have him help lead in Awana? And that turned out to be an amazing thing.
It was amazing.
And so I forgive you, and God moved in spite of all that, but that's a true story. Remember, we lost Dan, but it turned out to be really great.
Yeah. Well, and some maybe we'll conclude on another horrible note, but part of ministry, you like when we look at old church directories, part of it is sad. When you look at the kids that were involved, and watching the videos last night, there are some really exciting stories, but there are a lot of heartbreaking stories, and it's not you, that theologically, and that you can't make people walk with the Lord, and you can't make them come for the right reasons, but now you've put in what? I haven't done the math, but is it 30-some years? Wow, 35 years. I mean, you got at least 10 to go. Yeah. That's impressive. I guess when you start at 20. What has that been like in ministry, having the joys looking back, but also the heartaches?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question. We got another hour here. We'll take it right into the next service. But I mean, I kind of hinted around that, when you're young, you have all the energy in the world, and many of you relate to that in your own stories. And then God starts to move, and a lot of the movement that God does is not just in the lives of people that you're serving, but so much of it was in my own life, where God was transitioning me out of, it's not all about you. My MO for so long was I felt like I had to fix people. Have you ever been there? Somebody comes to you with a presenting issue, I'm like, got to fix that. And I would compound that with the fact that I wanted you to like me. So that's like a perfect storm. Like, I'm going to fix your problem because that's what pastors do. And I carried that pressure a lot. You'd come to me with a problem, and I would fix it. I was really good at fixing stuff. And then I would be winsome. I tried to be a little funny. And my goal was so that I would fix your problem and you would like me. And then I pray for you, because that's a really good thing to do too. And what I was doing was I was literally just putting duct tape, on a soul issue that you might be going through, and I was making you feel good about it, and I was making you dependent on me, a Messiah complex. And pastors love that. They love having people going, hey, I need the pastor. And I did that for like 25 years. And my friend said to me, then God had to come behind you and fix the fixes that you tried to fix. And that's true. I mean, God, out of his grace and out of his mercy, was able to kind of go, okay, I'm going to use all of that to fix that. And it was about only in the last 10 years I realized that my job is not to fix, and my validation can't come from people. And slowly, I'm kind of embarrassed to say it at 56 years of age, I'm starting to see that my validation comes from the Lord and not from what you do as a pastor. And because I was getting tired, I was burning out, tired of doing church programs for the sake of doing church programs, And now when I recognize that I'm already a saint, and my motivation is to serve through God's strength as a vessel, now, and my validation comes from the Lord. He's already made me right. And I'm starting to taste what many of you have tasted many, many years ago. I'm starting to taste that, and there's such a great joy and a freedom. And I'm in a season where I feel like my spirit is being so refreshed and renewed. In fact, part of the reason we moved to North Carolina recently was because we felt like we had a lot more left in the tank and that God had more for us to do. And so now, I will say I'm becoming a reductionist. That probably has a big theological meaning, but I'm reducing my ministry thoughts down to one thing, and that is just be with Jesus. Because I think if someone's truly been with Jesus and not just been to church, you can tell, right? And there's that passage that says, be ready in season and out to give a reason for the hope that lies within you. I've had people say, that's just a weird question. I'm like, maybe it's because you had no hope, right? Do you live a life that's compelling enough where people would go, there's something different about you? And it's not because you're working so hard. It's not because you have a big church with lots of money coming through. No, you're walking a different way. And so in this season of my life, so much of my practice, I get up even this morning, I just spending time just alone with Jesus, but not so I can check the box and say I was alone with Jesus today, but I just want to create space for him in my life. And I'm telling you, the joy coming from that, the peace that truly passes understanding, and releasing the work of God in the lives of people back to him, because he never lost it to begin with, has been so freeing. And now when I meet with people and I hear your stories, I don't feel like I'm fixing anything. I feel like I'm watching God work and going, thank you, God. I get to watch how you're moving through someone's life, and I'm just cheering you on and helping you. And so this fall, in our church, we're going to start scaling back, actually. We looked at our calendar and went, wow, we have just so much stuff. You know, you go on the website, wow, there's church a lot. And we're going, you know what? We're just going to focus on three things. And that is, one, we want to show people how to be with Jesus. And then the gospel is just like, I think Jesus said to be like him, to be like Jesus. And then out of that flows what you do. Do what Jesus did. And all of us, we've created too many programs where people can, we'll do it all for you. You know, I think as pastors, we've allowed people to abdicate ministry to us because we'll do it. But I think what I want to do in this season is empower people to be with Jesus, be like Jesus, and then see how God moves through them. And maybe there will be a season of great joy in that for them.
Nice. Well, should we thank Neil for coming? He left when he was 32, and he's 56 now, 24 years later. I mentioned last night, if he waits another 24, he'll be 80. So I think we need him to come back sooner than another 24. Amen?
There's a youth ministry position open, I think.
Yeah. Hired. Let's pray, shall we? Lord, thank you for this time, and I thank you for my brother, and I thank you for what you've done. We're imperfect vessels, each one of us, but we serve a perfect God who does wonderful things through imperfect vessels. So thank you for the gift set that you gave him that was very unique. Thank you for the way that you used that to impact this community and the lives of many. And Lord, I thank you that he's continued to have a ministry, and he's continued to impact others throughout the country and beyond. And we just pray your blessing over him and Karen and those precious little boys that are all big boys now and their families. Thank you again for this time. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.